This happened 2 weeks ago. I'm Jess, a 30-year-old nurse working the night shift at St. Mary's Hospital. I've spent years doing this, so I'm used to the quiet. It's just me and the machines, and usually that's okay. I've been dealing with insomnia and the aftermath of a breakup, so the night shift is my escape, I think. I've never stopped thinking about what happened on that first night. The hospital felt old and a little creepy. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting odd shadows along the empty corridors. It was a still night, and the silence made every sound echo more than usual. I was settling into my routine. I checked on my patients, made notes, and watched the clock. The ticking of the wall clock filled the otherwise quiet air. Then I heard it. A soft groan coming from room 213. I remember thinking it was just the old pipes or my imagination. After all, room 213 was notorious for being home to comatose patients. No one should be awake in there. I went to check the monitor, my heart racing just a little. The readings looked steady. Maybe it was nothing, just fatigue playing tricks on me. I left the room, but the groans continued with the same unsettling rhythm. The next night, as I passed by room 213 again, I noticed the lights flickering in sync with the groans. It was strange, but I didn't want to think too much about it. I had patients to care for. Still, I felt my heartbeat quicken while I tried to shake off the feeling of dread creeping in. Then I saw it. A shadow at the end of the hallway. I blinked, and it was gone. My pulse quickened again. Maybe I was just tired. On my third night, everything intensified. I walked into room 214 to check on a patient who was recovering. He looked at me with wide eyes and whispered something that sent chills down my spine. "I spoke to him last night," he said. "He told me about his life." I stared at him, confused. "Who?" I asked. "The man in 213, he replied, looking serious. I felt a wave of ice run through me. I wasn't sure if I should laugh it off or be deeply concerned. I went to room 213 that evening, feeling like I was being drawn against my will. The lights were flickering again, and the groans were louder. My heart was pounding in my chest. I took a step forward, and then I saw the figure at the end of the hallway, more defined than before. It stood there, just watching me. I felt cold, my throat tightening. I took a deep breath. Then it vanished. I backed away, not sure if any of it was real. I thought about the whispers, the flickering lights, and the patient. I thought about what I might be missing about this hospital's past. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. What was going on? Something was very wrong, and I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. Maybe I should have told someone, but who would believe me? As I left that night, I glanced back at room 213. The door stood slightly ajar, and I could almost hear a whisper again. I shivered, knowing I couldn't ignore it any longer. I just didn't know how deep this thing ran. The next night, I arrived at the hospital feeling the weight of the past few shifts pressing down on me. I decided I couldn't let fear control my actions anymore. I was here to help people, to focus on my work, and not on ghosts or shadows. But as I walked through the empty hallways, the sense of dread loomed larger than ever. When I approached room 213, the door was closed, but a low hum filled the air. I paused outside, listening. The sounds were different this time, almost like whispered voices mixed with static. I took a deep breath, reminding myself it was just a hospital. I pushed the door open cautiously. The room was dark, and the monitor glowed in a rhythmic pattern. The patient inside lay still, just as I'd expected. But as I glanced around, I noticed something strange. On the bedside table, there was a collection of items: a locket, a faded photograph, and a worn-out journal that hadn't been there before. My pulse quickened. Who had left these things? I picked up the journal, its pages crinkled and yellowed. Scanning through it, I felt a chill run through me. It was filled with entries from a man named Thomas, detailing his life before the hospital. Each page seemed to pulse with a kind of urgency, expressing his frustrations and fears. The last entry was particularly unsettling. It spoke of being trapped, unable to leave, and ending with a single haunting line. "If you see me, help me." I dropped the journal, my fingers trembling. Was this what the patient in room 214 was talking about? Was it possible that the whispers he heard were linked to Thomas? I stepped back, suddenly overwhelmed. The flickering lights intensified, and I could swear the air felt heavier. As I turned to leave, I heard a voice. Not a groan, not a whisper, but a clear call. "Help me!" It echoed down the hallway and I froze. Panic surged through me. I didn't want to be there any longer. I rushed out of the room, slamming the door behind me. I headed toward the nurse's station, trying to convince myself it had just been my imagination. I didn't want to explain any of this to my coworkers. They'd laugh, or worse, think I was losing it. But as I got closer, I felt a chill again. The temperature had dropped suddenly. Glancing back, I noticed that the clock on the wall had stopped. The hands froze at 3:13 a.m. My breath hitched. I was sure it had been working earlier. Just then, the flickering overhead lights went out completely, plunging the hallway into darkness. I scrambled toward the nearest emergency light fixture, my heart pounding. That's when I heard it, a faint whimper coming from behind me, the unmistakable sound of someone crying. I spun around, my pulse racing, and I saw a figure standing at the edge of the corridor, obscured by shadows. I couldn't see their face, but I felt their presence. It was a feeling that sunk deep into my bones. My instinct told me to run. Just run. But then the figure whispered again. "Please." Was it Thomas? I remembered the journal and how he had begged for help. I had to discover the truth, even if it terrified me. I took a shaky step forward, drawn by a force I couldn't explain. And then, the lights flickered back on. The lights returned, but I wished they hadn't. What I saw sent a jolt of fear straight into my chest. The figure at the end of the corridor had moved closer. I could make out the outline. A man, his features blurred but unmistakably desperate. I felt like I was caught between reality and a nightmare. "Help me," he repeated, his voice breaking. I wanted to scream or run, but curiosity anchored me. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper, though my throat felt tight. He stepped into the light, and I saw his face. It was gaunt, eyes hollow, yet they held a spark of recognition. "Thomas," he said softly. The name echoed in my mind like a distant memory, the journal flashing through my thoughts. Suddenly, the monitors in the nearby rooms beeped wildly. I jolted, the noise clawing at my nerves. Thomas looked over his shoulder, panic making his eyes widen. "You have to help me. They're coming." I stepped back instinctively. "Who's coming? What do you mean?" The urgency in his voice melted some of my fear into concern. "I'm trapped here. I can't leave until you find—" He started, but before he could finish the lights flickered again, and the air felt charged with tension. The last light overhead buzzed, then went out. Darkness enveloped us once more. My breath hitched again. I couldn't see anything anymore, just the oppressive silence around me. I fumbled for my phone, its light cutting through the blackness, just as the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. They were heavy, purposeful. "Wait, Thomas," I called into the void. I stepped forward, but the ground felt uneven as I searched for him in the dark. "Where are you?" A ghostly whisper floated back. "Stay close." I could sense Thomas moving, but I was terrified to follow. Footsteps grew louder, and a metallic clattering sounded nearby. I raised my phone higher, darting the light across the corridor, but just as quickly as it had begun, the sound stopped, and then I saw it, right where I had just come from. The door of room 213 creaked open, revealing a deep blackness inside. It felt almost alive, breathing shadows. "Not him," a raspy voice said from beyond the threshold. My heart raced, realizing it was not Thomas speaking. I felt the pull of the door as if it was inviting me in. I backed away, hands shaking as I pointed my phone's light at the opening, but the darkness inside absorbed the light, leaving me with an unsettling feeling of dread. "Do you really want to help him?" the voice asked softly. I stumbled back. The fear was back, stronger this time. I turned away from the door and back to the direction of the nurse's station. But when I glanced back toward Thomas, he had vanished. "Thomas!" I shouted, my voice cracking. I could feel the weight of the shadows pressing in, closing around me. What the hell was happening? I needed to leave. I needed to escape. In that moment, the lights flickered back on and I saw it. A dark shape flickering from the corner of my eye. A figure was peeking from room 213, its eyes locked on me. A sense of impending dread began to consume me. Whatever was happening wasn't over yet, and I was right in the middle of it. I couldn't breathe. I had to make a choice. And soon. Then, a loud crash echoed from behind me, and everything went dark again. I stumbled, disoriented in the darkness. My heart was pounding like a drum, drowning out all other sounds. I pressed the button on my phone, desperate for light, and quickly scanned my surroundings. The hallway was empty. "Thomas?" I breathed, my voice trembling. The silence smothered me. I reached forward carefully, seeking the safety of the wall. My palms felt clammy against the cold, sterile surface. As I steadied myself, I heard something. A low, ominous chuckle echoing from room 213, followed by a soft thud. In that moment, I knew the choice had been made for me. I mustered every ounce of courage and took a step toward the door, curiosity and fear battling within me. The door creaked open wider than before, revealing a narrow strip of darkness. I could feel a strange energy pulling me in. I shone my light inside, heart racing, hoping for any sign of Thomas. But what I saw made me recoil. It wasn't just darkness, it was a void. The room appeared empty, yet the air felt thick, suffocating. A shadow shifted in the far corner, darting just out of sight. I squinted, straining to see, but it slipped quietly into the darkness again. "Please," I whispered, feeling ridiculous for pleading with an empty room. "I need to find him." Just then, the lights flickered back on, the harsh brightness stabbing at my eyes. I shielded them with my hand, but something was glaringly different. Now, the room was not empty. A figure sat hunched in the corner, motionless. I squinted at the shadowed outline. It was a woman, her hair hanging limply over her face. She wore a hospital gown, just like the ones worn by patients. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I stepped closer, my light illuminating her features. She was more fragile than I expected, her skin pale and eyes sunken. I felt a chill run along my spine. "Help him," she whispered, her voice barely audible, crackling like old machinery. "He can't leave." "Who?" I stammered, panic flooding my veins again. "Where's Thomas?" But before she could reply, a harsh noise erupted from behind me, like a door slamming shut, reverberating through the halls. The room grew cold, and the air was thick with a pressure that made it hard to breathe. "Run!" the woman shouted suddenly, her voice rising above the chaos. Without thinking, I turned and bolted, my heart racing. It felt as if invisible hands reached for me, pulling me back. The hallway stretched endlessly ahead, shadows swirling. I skidded to a stop at the nurse's station, panting. I spun around, reaching for my phone again, but the light flickered and went out, plunging me back into darkness. I pressed the button, but nothing happened. I was alone, surrounded by the niggling sense that I wasn't as safe as I thought. "Thomas!" I shouted again, the echo brushing past me. I needed to find him. I had to know what this was all about. Then, I heard it. The sound of footsteps returning, this time faster and more pronounced. They echoed like a heartbeat, each step reverberating in my chest. I turned to face the oncoming threat, feeling dread creep back into my bones. I was about to learn the true meaning of helplessness. I crouched low behind the nurse's station, my breath hitching in my throat. The footsteps were getting closer, each sound was deliberate, puncturing through the heavy silence of the hospital like a knife. I strained my ears, trying to catch a glimpse of whoever or whatever was approaching. "Thomas," I whispered again, half hoping he'd magically appear. But only the oppressive stillness replied. Suddenly the lights flickered harshly before stabilizing. I shot up from my hiding place, guarding my trembling hands. The shadow at the end of the hallway twisted, momentarily revealing a figure, tall, dark-coated, and oddly familiar. My heart sank. "Is that you?" I called out, wavering between hope and fear. As I squinted, the figure moved and I froze. It wasn't Thomas. A burst of adrenaline surged through me, compelling me to stay hidden. I fumbled for anything to defend myself. My mind raced. What was happening? Why did the woman in the room urge me to run? "Come out!" The figure beckoned, voice low and smooth, reverberating down the hall. It sent a shiver down my spine. "I won't hurt you." A chill of recognition hit me, but I couldn't place why. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice shaky but loud enough to echo back at me. "Just a friend," he said, taking another slow step forward. I felt a jolt of panic flood my limbs. I didn't want to find out what his idea of a friend meant. I turned and sprinted down the hallway, desperate for an exit. I dashed past empty patient rooms, their doors hanging ajar, revealing shadows that seemed to pulse as I raced past. The silence pressed in on me, making my escape feel almost surreal. Then I remembered the woman in room 213. I skidded to a halt, torn between running and the need to know who she was. What had she meant about Thomas? I risked a quick glance over my shoulder. The figure stood motionless, watching me from a distance. Fear tightened my chest. I had to get answers. Turning on my heel, I ran back towards room 213. As I pushed the door open, I felt a rush of cold air sweep past me, causing goosebumps to erupt along my skin. The room was once again shrouded in darkness. "Hello?" I called, my voice cracking. The sudden void swallowed my words, amplifying my solitude. Just as I was about to retreat, I caught a glimmer in the corner where the woman had sat. I felt something shift. The air around me buzzed ominously and I instinctively took a step back. "Help him." Her voice returned, clearer this time, but it echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "You must choose." What did that mean? My heart raced as realization struck. Something was forcing me into a decision. My eyes darted around the room. That's when I saw it. A small, crumpled piece of paper lying on the floor. As I bent to pick it up, the lights flickered back on. My breath caught in my throat as the room transformed before my eyes. There was Thomas, lying unconscious on the hospital bed, eyes closed and chest rising and falling weakly. Panic clawed at my insides. "Thomas!" I cried, rushing to his side. I shook his shoulder, desperate to wake him. But the moment I touched him, I felt a cold wave wash over me, dark and heavy. I gasped, running out of breath, as if the air was taken away. Then, everything went dark again. A sharp laugh echoed around me, mingling with the sounds of my own fading heartbeat. I realized the figure was right behind me, and I was utterly trapped. I felt my heart stop as darkness engulfed me, a suffocating void. For a split second, I thought I had slipped into some dreamlike state. But then the laughter grew louder, and I could feel a presence looming over me. Panic seized me. "Let go of me," I cried, struggling against an unseen force that wrapped around my limbs like chains. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel the temperature drop around me, prickling my skin. Just as quickly as it started, the darkness lifted and I stumbled back into the hospital room. The lights blared harshly, and I squinted against the brightness. My breaths came in rapid gasps, and I looked frantically for the figure, but he was gone. "Thomas?" I choked out, unsure if I was still dreaming. I turned to the bed, and my chest tightened when I found him still unconscious. I stepped forward to check his pulse, my fingers trembling against his wrist. It was weak, but there. "Please wake up," I begged, my voice quaking. I remembered the urge to help him. What was I supposed to do? Then the paper I had picked up fluttered to the ground, drawing my attention again. I grabbed it, unfolding it quickly. The words slashed through my confusion. "Trust the shadows. Protect what lies beneath." "Protect what lies beneath," I whispered, feeling chills dance up my spine. What did that even mean? Was Thomas the one in danger? Or was it something else? Suddenly the door creaked open, and I spun around, my heart hammering. A nurse walked in, her expression unreadable. She froze as she saw me at the bedside, panic in her eyes. "You shouldn't be in here," she said, rushing toward me. "You have to leave." "Wait, I need to help him," I pleaded, standing my ground. I needed answers, and she was my only hope. "Help him? You don't even know what you're getting into," she warned, glancing back at the shadowy corner of the room. "You have to leave now." "No," I shot back. You don't understand. I heard that woman's voice and she said I needed to choose. The nurse's face paled as she looked at me with a mix of fear and dismay. You should never have listened to her. You have no idea what you've invoked. What do you mean? I demanded, but the blood drained from her face completely. As if on cue, the lights began to flicker again, and the comforting hum of machinery started to sputter. The nurse backed away slowly, eyeing the room as if it were about to collapse. That's not good, she muttered under her breath, her gaze darting around the room. The shadows! Before she could finish her warning, the temperature plummeted, and Thomas let out a low moan. I rushed back to him, feeling the air crawling with tension. What's happening? I cried. The words barely escaped my lips when the lights flickered once more, plunging us into semi-darkness again. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't. I needed to help Thomas, even if it meant facing whatever shadows awaited me. Thomas, I shouted, gripping his shoulder, you need to wake up, help me. But all I heard in return was the echo of laughter again. I turned back to the nurse, desperation clawing at my throat. What do I do? Her eyes locked onto the door before she whispered, Get out. It's coming. That was when the shadows shifted behind me. And this time, they weren't just hovering. They were moving closer. I felt a chill run down my spine as the shadows gathered. They twisted and expanded, a dark mass that seemed to breathe. I couldn't tear my eyes away. It was like they were calling to me, inviting me in. Leave! Now! The nurse shouted, panic flooding her voice. Her words jolted me back to reality. I glanced at Thomas, his face pale and still. No, I insisted, shaking my head. I can't just abandon him. But deep down, that primal urge to run battled against my need to stay. The shadows writhed like living beings, pressing closer. The nurse reached for me, her grip tightening desperately around my arm. Please, you don't understand. It's not just shadows, it's something much worse. Then, as if the room had been plunged underwater, the sound faded. I could still see everything happening, but it felt like I was in a bubble. Only the steady beeping from the machines broke through the thick silence. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement caught my attention. I turned just in time to see a figure emerging from the dark. It was smaller, more defined than before. It moved with an unsettling grace. Thomas! I shouted, hoping he could hear me through the murky haze. But my heart sank as the figure came into focus. It wasn't Thomas. It looked like a child. She floated a few feet off the ground, her eyes wide and shimmering with darkness, her mouth twisted in that nightmarish grin. I stumbled backward, the nurse pulling me away from the bed. We need to get out now, she insisted. From behind the girl, shadowy tendrils reached out, their tips curling and retracting like snakes testing the air. I was frozen, caught between fear and the instinct that I needed to find out what was happening. Stop, I yelled, feeling my voice get lost in the depths of the gathered darkness surrounding us. The girl cocked her head, her smile widening, and I felt an overwhelming sadness seep in. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't understand why she looked so familiar. Protect what lies beneath, I whispered, remembering the words from the note. The girl's laughter rang out, echoing in my mind, filling every corner of the room. It enveloped me, wrapping around my senses. I pressed my hands to my ears, wanting it to stop, but it grew louder, the shadows surrounding her flaring with each peal of laughter. Make her stop, I screamed. The nurse tugged me toward the door, urgency flooding her movements. We have to go now. With a final glance back at Thomas, I reluctantly allowed her to pull me out of the room. The shadows seemed to writhe angrily as the door swung shut, cutting off that chilling laughter. I leaned against the wall outside, gasping for breath. What was that? The nurse's expression turned grave. That was what I was afraid of. You chose, and now, they won't let you go. My mind raced with questions. What did I choose? And how was I involved with the child? The nurse suddenly pressed her finger to her lips, and I followed her gaze down the corridor. As the lights flickered again, I saw movement, the unmistakable silhouette of a child standing alone in the dim glow at the end of the hall. And I knew it was far from over. I couldn't shake the image of the child from my mind as we hurried down the corridor. The nurse's soft grip on my arm felt like a lifeline, but I was still stumbling through the fog of panic. "What do you mean I chose?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just follow me," she urged, her eyes darting down the hallway. "We need a place to hide." I didn't have to ask what from. I could feel the weight of something behind me, creeping closer, like a predator stalking its prey. I glanced back, half expecting to see the girl gliding silently along the tiles. Instead, I was met only with shadow and flickering lights. We ducked into a supply closet, cramming ourselves between the shelves of sterile supplies and boxes of gloves. The room smelled of antiseptic, but it felt like a fortress compared to the chaos outside. "Okay, now tell me what you meant," I pressed, my heart racing. The nurse pulled in a shaky breath. "There are forces in this hospital. Dark forces. The child you saw, she's been here before. She leads people into the shadows. Once you see her, you can't unsee her." "What does that mean? Why me?" I felt a knot forming in my stomach. "There are things here, things that take from you. They feed on fear. You were drawn in, perhaps because of him." She nodded toward the door. "Thomas is connected to it all." I shook my head, struggling to understand. "But I'm just here to help him." "No," she said firmly. "You were meant to leave when you still could. Now it's too late." Suddenly, a thump echoed outside the closet. I could feel my breath hitch in my throat. The nurse pressed her finger to her lips again, silencing me as we waited in the suffocating silence. Then, just as suddenly, the din stopped. There was a moment of eerie calm before I heard soft, sing-song laughter echo through the corridor. It was the child's voice, a melody that sent chills racing down my spine. "What do we do?" I whispered, panic seeping back in. "We wait," the nurse said, her face a mask of resolve, but her eyes told a different story. Just then, the closet door rattled, and a soft voice called out, "Help me, please." It was the child. "Don't," the nurse hissed, her grip tightening around my arm. "Don't open the door!" But something in the girl's plea struck a chord in me. Desperate to know more, I took a tentative step toward the door. "What do you want?" I called out, barely containing the fear clawing at my throat. The laughter stopped. Silence filled the air, heavy and suffocating. I could feel the weight of 1,000 eyes on me from the shadows outside. And then I heard her whisper, soft and inviting. "Help me find him." My heart raced. Find who? But no response came. I glanced at the nurse, fear evident in her eyes. "Don't listen to her," she urged, but I felt an undeniable pull toward the child's voice. That's when I saw something move at the edge of the closet, a flicker of shadow flaring in my peripheral vision. My breath hitched as I realized we weren't alone. "Someone's here," I murmured, a wave of dread coursing through me. The nurse's expression turned grave. "We have to go." But I was rooted to the spot, my mind racing. I'd come here to help Thomas. Now I understood. That wasn't the only reason I was here. The shadows inched closer, and a new thought slipped into my mind, one that gripped me with terror. Maybe I had arrived just in time to discover the truth hidden within the hospital's dark heart. The rattling continued, the sound echoing like a soft threat. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat urging me to run. But the urge to stay and uncover the truth about the girl held me in place. "Follow me," the nurse said urgently, pulling me back from the door. We squeezed between the shelves, feeling every inch of the cramped space. The shadows were growing bolder, shifting just outside our hiding place. "What do you think is out there?" I whispered, fearful I was breaking some unspoken rule that would summon whatever lurked in the darkness. The nurse shook her head, her face pale. "I don't want to know." Before I could respond, the door creaked open slightly. The child's voice drifted in again, more insistent this time. "Please, I need your help." It was almost melodic, but there was an undercurrent of something darker that sent chills racing down my arms. "What if she really needs us?" I argued, my voice trembling. "Don't!" the nurse hissed through clenched teeth, panic weighing heavily on her words. She's not what she seems. Suddenly, a sharp noise shattered the silence. A crash, somewhere far down the corridor. It felt like a warning. The nurse's eyes widened, and she gripped my arm tighter. We need to move now. We navigated out of the closet, instinctively knowing we had to hurry. I felt the air grow heavy as if the corridor was tightening around us, a noose ready to pull us into the darkness. As we neared the hallway's exit, a flicker of movement caught my eye. I turned just in time to see a tall figure standing at the far end of the corridor. It was hard to make out the details, but the outlines of a white coat hung loosely on the figure. The face was shadowed, but I could feel it staring right at me. "Who is that?" I whispered, my voice filled with dread. The nurse seemed frozen, her expression a mix of fear and recognition. "We have to keep going. Don't stop to look." I wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the figure shifted, revealing a faint glimmer of light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. I was torn. Something about the way the light flickered felt oddly familiar. Then the laughter returned, echoing down the hall. "Help me find him." My stomach twisted at the sound. Who is she talking about? I wondered aloud. But the nurse pulled me onward, urgency in her pace. We rounded a corner and stumbled upon a stairwell, dimly lit but offering an escape. "Down we go," she said, plunging ahead. As we descended, the shadows seemed to swirl around us, trying to follow. I could feel the oppressive weight of that silent figure outside, pressing down like a storm cloud waiting to break. Reaching the bottom, we found ourselves in a narrow basement corridor. The air was thick, as if it was saturated with secrets. I glanced back up the stairs, half expecting the child to appear again, but it was quiet. For now. "Why is Thomas connected to all this?" I asked, panting, the questions bubbling up uncontrollably. The nurse paused, her eyes clouded with fear. "Because he's the key, and if they find out you're here, it all might unravel." Before I could respond, I heard shuffling nearby, followed by a soft thud. I turned, expectation creeping in. What was that? Then, everything went dark. I stumbled through the oppressive blackness, caught in a web of dread and uncertainty. My heart raced as I braced for whatever was lurking beyond the veil of darkness. Then, in an instant, the lights flickered back on, illuminating the narrow basement corridor. I instinctively held my breath. The faint glow revealed a room at the end of the hall, its door cracked open just enough for a sliver of light to spill out. I didn't know what lay within, but the air thrummed with an unsettling energy. The nurse beside me hesitated, her eyes darting to this new point of interest. "We shouldn't," she said softly, her voice laced with fear. "We need to keep—" "Wait!" I interrupted. I had to know. It felt like something important was waiting just beyond that door. "Let's just take a quick look." Against her better judgment, she followed as I stepped toward the door, drawn by an invisible thread. Each cautious step inched me closer to the unknown. I pushed the door wide, and the room revealed itself, a dimly lit space filled with old hospital equipment and forgotten memories. In the center stood a large, dusty mirror framed in tarnished metal. The surface rippled like water, and an inexplicable pull tugged at my sense of urgency. "What is this place?" I breathed, entranced. Suddenly the air turned cold, and I felt the heaviness of innumerable stares upon me. A fleeting thought nagged at my brain, the whispers growing louder. "Help me find him," echoed through my mind. I could almost feel the pressure of 1,000 voices converging around me. "Jess, we have to go," the nurse urged, her hand gripping my shoulder. But I couldn't move. "What if it's connected to Thomas?" I demanded, my resolve hardening. "We have to understand." Impatiently, I leaned closer to the mirror. For a brief moment the surface shifted, revealing glimpses of blurry scenes, fragments of a life. An older man, a child's laughter, a nurse, and then, there, a flash of Thomas, stirring in the hospital bed, the shadows that clung closer now flickering ominously in the reflection. "Protect what lies beneath," echoed the chilling reminder, and the air shifted as if the mirror had come to life. The faces transformed, distorting into anguished expressions that screamed for release. Just as quickly, the images vanished, replaced again by my own shadowy reflection. Panic ignited within me. "Thomas!" I called out, desperate for some sign, but my voice felt swallowed by the silence. "Let's leave," the nurse pleaded, terror etched on her face as the mirror pulsed with ominous energy. "It's a trap." With a sudden surge, shadows erupted from the mirror, pouring forth like black ink spilling across a canvas. Startled, I stumbled backward, colliding with the nurse, who cried out in shock. The shapes lunged toward us, manifesting in twisted figures that danced along the walls, dark eyes gleaming with hunger. I felt a fierce current of dread as the oppressive darkness drew closer. "Thomas!" I shouted one last time, a plea that felt like a shard of glass lodged in my throat. My desperation fueled my movements. "We need to help him." But as the shadows slinked nearer, I realized I was no longer sure what help truly meant. A memory flickered in my mind. The woman in the hospital gown warning me, "You must choose." Finally, the nurse yanked me away from the mirror, her breath ragged in my ear. "Now, run!" We sprinted back down the corridor, the shadows snarling at our heels. The laughter echoed louder, and I realized that the walls themselves were becoming a labyrinth, folding in and around us, shifting our sense of direction. "Where do we go?" I screamed over the cacophony. "Down!" she shouted back, dragging me through another doorway, plunging into a hidden stairwell that spiraled into darkness. I followed blindly, half expecting to hear the ghostly child's voice chasing after us, but the laughter faded behind us. We stumbled into a wide basement that felt both unsettled and serene. The soft hum of a generator purred in the background, a reminder of the outside world. The faint glow from emergency exit signs flickered like distant stars, yet I could still feel the thick residue of fear coating the air. "We made it," I gasped, leaning against the wall as I struggled to catch my breath. "Not yet," she warned urgently, looking back toward the staircase. "They'll find us if we stay too long." "What do you mean?" I stammered, my mind still racing. "Who are they?" "The guardians of the shadows," she replied gravely. "They don't want us to uncover the truth." But the truth, what was it? What had Thomas created? I glanced around, desperately seeking distraction, but no answers were near. Just then, a noise echoed from the far end of the basement. The shape of a small figure glided into view. My breath caught as recognition washed over me. The little girl stood there, swaying ever so slightly, her dark eyes fixed on me, lips curled into that haunting grin. "Help me find him," she sang, her voice pulling me toward her. A surge of instinct forced me to step back, yet I found myself inching toward her as if spellbound. "No!" I shouted at the nurse. "She needs us." "She's not what she seems. Don't believe her." Her voice faltered, desperation mixing with fierceness. "If you go to her, it'll consume you too." But the words felt like whispers against a tempest, drowned by the alluring thrill that danced on the edges of my consciousness. "I have to help Thomas." The child giggled, that melodic laughter wrapping around me like silk. I could feel the call of shadows about to swallow the light. And as the truth loomed ahead, this was deeper and darker than I had anticipated. I realized I was trapped not only between drawers of fate, but also within a revealing cycle that demanded a choice. Would I step closer to the abyss for Thomas, or would I turn back for the nurse? An electric charge sparked in the air as I faced the girl, caught between knowing and unknowing, the darkness beckoning and the light flickering a distant memory. But realization loomed over me like an ominous storm cloud. A choice must emerge, even if it tore me apart. I hesitated as the shadows pressed closer. Whatever bond existed in this abyss, I could feel the truth nestled within the darkness, and for a fleeting moment, the answer seemed painfully close. Then, the world spun. A sudden rush of realization hit me hard and I was left stranded between choices, questioning everything I thought I knew. And then, it all faded to black.